Welcome to Coffee with the Sarlos. We are your hosts of the show, Karen and Kelly Sarlo. Whether you're struggling with grief or you just need answers, we connect you with spirit to find relief, clarity, and direction in life. We can help you move forward.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
I chose Harry Potter names.
We'll see.
Petunia,
Okay.
Minerva.
All right.
I went straight to, I was going to say Hogwarts.
I wish.
I went straight to the internet.
Both magical places.
And looked up Harry Potter names. I'm just recalling that someone had emailed me and said that they thought it would be a great idea. And I thought, I agree. So I found Petunia and Minerva. And I decided, because I don't know who either one of them are.
Shut the fuck up.
I cannot remember. So
Name your clients wisely.
Okay, so I don't know if I did, and that's why I'm bringing this up at the very beginning of this recording, because I'm not sure that I've placed the names to the proper types of personalities.
I don't know the last time I've gone from excited to this annoyed so fast.
I'm happy that I can do that for you.
Wow, thank you.
Okay.
Good luck today.
So the client is Petunia. But the way the session starts, I've got to back it up a little bit, in that right before a session starts, I'm just standing at my sit-to-stand desk, and Zoom is going to come on. I've got it on, and I'm waiting for the client to enter. So that means it's only within a minute or so, because I don't go on 20 minutes early. Anyway, so the camera's on, and so I'm hearing first, I hear an older woman's voice say, "Marco." And that's it. That's just it. But it made me laugh. And because it was just so abrupt right before the session began. And I just kind of had this goofy smile on my face. What the hell is that? How am I supposed to place that in a session? What am I going to do with that kind of a message for somebody? So then I just thought, okay, I better leave that be. I don't know what to do. So then the session starts. Petunia is a young woman. So she's my client, and so she appears on the screen, and I have this big smile on my face, and I said, I'll explain it in a minute. I have to get through consent first. So I did the consent process. That's great. And then I said to her, okay, I said, right before your session started, I had this goofy smile on my face. I'd like to explain it to you. You can fill in and explain it if you want, or do whatever you wish with it. It may be applicable, it may not. And I said, right before the session began, I said, I heard an older woman's voice clearly yell in a very sing-songy, lovely way, not in a mean way, "Marco," like this. And Petunia gets a beautiful smile on her face. And I said, oh, you can place that, because I can see she's responding to it, eh? And she goes, yeah, I can. And she says, I'm asking for the person that did that. She said, I want medium today, and we're going to name the dead lady Minerva. So Minerva continues, and she says, okay, I'm here, and I want to show you something. So I see an older home, and it is not at all, my home is older, but it's not at all like the color scheme or the drywall. This home has more old hardwood flooring in it in the dark brown color. Actually, Kelly, it would look more like a Harry Potter home. It's got the wood and the darker colors in it, including the bigger, clunkier, or I shouldn't say clunky, the bigger furniture. And I see a puzzle on a table. I see a variety of things in the house, an old staircase that's wooden. And I describe it to Petunia, and she smiles. She says, do you know where you are? And I said, no. I said, I don't yet. She goes, well, then just continue. She says, I'm not in a rush. This is what I'm here for. You're on track. Just go. So I walk into the house a little bit. I hear a doorbell after I've walked into the house, and I think, who rang the bell? And Petunia says, I would ring the bell. Okay. And I said, so you're the one that walks in the house and yells Marco? And she goes, yep. She says it was my way of letting her know that it was me at the door. I would ring the bell, but I'd let myself in because she told me to let myself in. So she comes in, she yells Marco. So Minerva will yell Polo, and I hear it, and I see her in different parts of the house. And then I see Petunia, if she figures out, well, I can go there, so it's the main floor kind of a thing, or the basement, she'll go, and she'll continue to call her. If it's upstairs, no, because it's like bedrooms and it's private, that kind of thing. And so I say this to her, and she goes, that's correct. And she goes, do you have more to say about the house? And I said, I described it to her and the coloring. And I said, there's a table, and it was in a room where there seemed like a library. But it wasn't really a library. It was just somebody who had put bookcases against a wall haphazardly, but still was very neat and orderly. And I described that. And she said, yes, that's a really good description. Anything else? And I said, there's a puzzle on a table near a fireplace. So I could just see a puzzle and a fireplace. And I said, is that correct? Because I don't literally see the layout of the room. And she wanted me, Petunia was like, well, can you get more information about the room? And I said, no. I said, I just see the puzzle in the fireplace. And she goes, I said, is there a reason that you want me to? No, she says, it would just be fun. And I said, yeah, I can see your point that would be fun. Absolutely. And I said, when we remote view, there's purpose to it. So I can understand that when you're doing this kind of thing, you just want more validations. And she said, yeah. And I said, that's all I get. Then all of a sudden, Minerva comes in and I can see her. And Kelly, she reminds me of my mom's kind of age group with the way that they curled their hair in curlers and then brushed it out, which so is not the way that women my age, because now I'm that age, I'm in my 60s, we don't do that to our hair. We flat iron our hair. We do different things. So I looked at this woman and I thought, oh my God, is she a throwback like to my mom's generation? And so I really thought she was that old. And I said to her, geez, I said, looking at her age, she must be like in her 90s or 100 now. And she goes, no, she'd be in her 60s, but she has a haircut that looks like an older woman. And I said, okay. So Minerva shows me that. And then Petunia says, like, she will always say something else to me like, well, what else does she look like? She'll always want like more of the details. And I said, I don't know. She'll just give me pieces. So she goes, so really all you're seeing is a head with hair?
Sometimes. Shit gets weird over here. Yes. We just don't make it weird.
That's right. I said to her, yes, that's all I get. She goes, well, anything else about the head? And I said, black rim glasses. And she goes, yep, she has black rim glasses. And I didn't get any other striking features about her face. I didn't get eye color or anything like that. So I just said to Petunia, this is what I get. I don't get the other things. And she was always good to ask the question because she was super curious. And but never like it's not enough. It would just be, oh, okay, and move on because I don't want to interrupt your flow. There was such a beautiful curiosity combined with a respect in Petunia that made the session for me as a channeler super, super engaging and fun and rewarding. Okay. And then, so now I'm in the house and poof, the house disappears like in 2 seconds. And I'm in a bookstore and I just remembered like being overwhelmed with these beautiful feelings of excitement to be in a bookstore. And honestly, Kelly, you know me personally, so you know that's me. And I had to sit there and go, Jesus, are these my feelings or are these Minerva's feelings or are these Petunia's feelings? And who's in the bookstore? Like, why am I here? And how do I separate myself? Because that's what I would feel from, right?
Yeah, I think it's neat that you still go through the evaluation process. I think it speaks to your integrity. Because, and the reason I can say this, if by chance you were happening to channel someone whose memories were of frequenting a bookstore, but they felt fear or boredom or shame or sadness or dread, you would have felt that immediately with the vision itself. And you would have been easily quick to say, oh, okay, this is not my stuff. This is obviously how the other person felt, because there's an immediate contrast to your feelings or opinions.
Yeah.
But I still love that you check in to ask, is this mine
Yeah.
or theirs?
Yes. Thank you. I didn't see it like that, but that's very true. So I asked the spirit guides like to explain this and whose feelings they are. And the spirit guides tell me it's both women and they met in a bookstore. And I'm like, oh, okay. So instantly, because I see a big age difference between the two women, I say, are they partners? Are they family? Is this a mom and a daughter? Is this an aunt? Is this a grandma? Like, what is the relationship? Because that's a good validation. What's the relationship? And I hear friendship. They meet in a bookstore and they just chat in the bookstore and discover that they actually really both love books, different types of books, and they decide they're just going to sit in the bookstore because there's a coffee in the bookstore.
Coffee shop.
What did I say?
A coffee. Ooh, never mind. I'm going to let you keep going. A coffee shop is in the bookstore.
There's a coffee shop in the bookstore. And so they just decide that they're just going to go sit down and have a cup of coffee together. And that's how the friendship starts. They meet just originally in the bookstore. So I said that to Petunia. I said, oh, you guys met in a bookstore. You had a cup of coffee. You keep going back to this bookstore. You keep going back and having coffees. This is a friendship that really develops over the books and the coffee.
What a love story.
Isn't it?
Of whatever dynamic, just a love story.
Yeah. And she said, that's correct. She said, it's totally. And I said, a lot of your conversations, even after that, are based on what you learn. And she goes, yes. And I said, oh, I said, this is significant about the relationship and the fullness of it. And she goes, and some other things too. That's that. And then I see where all of a sudden the next step is that they're in Minerva's house. And I said, oh, I said, you end up going to Minerva's house. And she goes, yes. And I said, I don't see another location like your house. And she goes, never, she never came to my house. I always visited her. And okay, so that's great validation. And then at her house, at Minerva's house, I see the puzzle again. And I said, "Oh, you guys end up doing the puzzles." And she goes, "Yes, we both love jigsaw puzzles." And I said, "Oh, I said, your relationship with her is based on a lot of common interests." Yes. And I said, "And you guys like knowledge. You both like building things. You both like so many things that are similar. So you do those things. So if you figure out that you both like cooking, you will cook together." Yes. And I said, "So you get to know each other based on things that you share. And as a result of that, that's how there's such a close bond to each other." And she goes, "Yes."
That is the beauty of friendship, period. And I know we're reading Platonic in book club, which I highly recommend to anyone, whether you're in book club or not, to explore what really is the beauty of friendship.
Yeah. And so Minerva starts talking to me at this point in more detail, and she says, like, Petunia really challenged me in what I read, and she would suggest things I would never have read. And so I really broadened the way that I was able to connect to her. And I said, "Oh, that's good." And she goes, "Yes." She said she really stretched my opinions, my decisions, my choices, my like she really stretched me. And it was all done through the love of books. It was all due through the love of that it's learning and that it's curiosity. And that eventually she challenged me in what I was reading about beliefs and about beliefs about things that were, I'll say, safe. And this is important because it stays in that way for a few years. And then I said, what happened? And she goes, well, I got sick. And I said, okay, like sick to the point that you died? Yes. So I said to Petunia, she died from illness, correct? And she goes, yep. And so I said to Minerva, what did you have? And she said, I had cancer. I said, okay. Do you want to tell me where? She goes, no, it's not important. It wasn't in my brain. And I said, pardon? I've never heard that worded that way before. She goes, well, it wasn't cancer of my brain. So it's not really relative to say because it was just a death by cancer. If it had been by my brain, I would have lost my ability to reason, to think, memory, cognitive function, taking care of myself. I had that. And I said, oh, that's really cool. Thank you. I said, are you saying it for any other reason, Minerva? And she says, yes. She said, before I passed, she said, Petunia challenged me by telling me that she's gay. And I said, okay. I said, what do you mean challenged you? And she goes, well, she said, during our relationship, and being in my home, she saw pictures of a woman her age in my home and asked me who it was because I didn't speak about any young woman. And she said, I told her that was my daughter. And it came to be that I explained that I had been close to my daughter till she came out and said she was gay. And I said, okay, what happened? And she goes, I disowned my daughter. And I said, why? But that was just my response, my reaction. I couldn't figure that out. That's unfathomable to me. And she said, well, now I can answer the questions differently than when I was on Earth. She said, but I had been taught to believe, I had been groomed to believe that that wasn't normal. And I said, oh, so you understand now that's a grooming process. That's a societal or religious or whatever, but it's some kind of a process of grooming. And she said, yes, I understand it now. And she said, but at the time, she said, when I was diagnosed and when I really got sick and I was more house-ridden, bedridden, like all of these things, she said, Petunia was coming over more often. She was cooking in my home for me. She was putting things in the freezer and caring for me. But she was basically doing all the things that my daughter could have done for me and wanted to do for me. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You said wanted. And she said, yeah, I didn't allow my daughter to do those things for me because I rejected her emotionally. And then my daughter put her foot down and said, I'm not changing who I am in order to be in your life because you've been groomed to believe some things. You deal with your grooming issues, and I'm just going to go live my life. But Minerva never made her way out of de-grooming herself, or if you call it ungrooming. She never made her way out of it. She never tried. And instead, she sees Petunia in this bookstore, and she's roughly the same age as her daughter, gets to have this coffee and this friendship, and allows Petunia to fulfill the role of daughter, but never says anything to her about fulfilling this kind of a role. She just lets it happen. So then near the end of life, Petunia says to Minerva, what's the story about your daughter? And asks these questions. And as Minerva's sick and going through her stages of, I'll say, preparing to transition. And through that period of time, Petunia says, I'm gay. And Minerva looks at her like, what? And she goes, well, I've just never brought my partner here. This is just my relationship. This is my friendship with you. And she says, but so what has any of that got to do with me being gay? Just like your daughter. And so Minerva is now in the situation where she's dying. She's losing the ability of her body, so she's vulnerable. And Petunia is saying, well, I'm gay, your daughter's gay. What's happening? Where are we? And Minerva makes the decision, I need somebody to cook. I need somebody to clean. I can't do these things for myself. So now that I need something, I'm going to be okay with you being gay because I need what you're providing for me. And Petunia says basically to her, that's not okay. That's a lack of integrity. And I'm not going to let you get away with that. So, no. And Minerva then says, well, what do you mean? Like, what are you telling me that means? And she doesn't want to figure it out on her own. She doesn't want to have to do any maturing on her own or any of that psychological or whatever you want to call it, self-work to actually figure out what Petunia is saying. And Petunia says to her, no, this is what happens when you die, Minerva. You have to be confronted with how you've lived your life, where you've been groomed, or you can continue to run from it, and then you can face it when you cross over. But I'm not going to enable you, and I'm not going to be here and be your daughter replacement. Now that I understand this friendship, and I'm actually angry with you at your response, and the fact that you're not willing to do your work. And yet, in our entire friendship, you've given me the perceptions that you love growing, that you love reading, that you love learning, that you love expanding yourself. Really? Really? Or is it selective, and that you're selective in what you're doing and where you choose to say you're growing or you're actually becoming a healthier person? But when it comes to one particular area, that's off limits. I'm okay to be groomed there, and I don't want to be challenged in any of the ways that society has conditioned my thinking. I don't want to have to look at that. I'm old, I'm dying, I don't want to. And Petunia says to her, no, I think this is actually the right time. And I think it's long overdue. And I think your daughter tried to hold you accountable. And I'm going to hold you accountable too, because obviously your daughter loved you and I love you too. But love means holding people accountable to looking at how we've been groomed in all areas of our life. And I'm just going to say I love you, but I'm not willing to keep coming over here and doing this for you, which leaves Minerva with who's going to do all these things. And then she realizes, wow, she says, when I crossed over, I really had to look at that because everything went to shit in my house. And I look at the house, and Kelly, it went from, remember the beginning when I said to you, a nice bookcase, a nice puzzle on the table, a fireplace. Somehow there was a feeling of orderly in the house, neat, calm. It goes to total chaos because she's not able to care for herself physically. She's not able to do all of these things. She doesn't have the energy or the capabilities anymore. And you see where she's not being cared for well, and where she dies. And I want to say, I'm not positive of this, but it's my assumption here. I think perhaps she dies sooner than she needs to, because she's actually not able to care for herself, and she's not getting the nutrition from the meals that Petunia was still feeding her. The water, like all of the care, the love. Go ahead.
She doesn't get the nutrition because Petunia's not there giving those things to her.
That's right.
That was not worded well.
Sorry.
But understood.
Petunia decides, I'm not staying. Mm-hmm. You've got some work to do to think. I can come back and continue to help you, but I can't come here just to help you when you treat people this way. Mm-hmm. You treat people in unhealthy ways, but then expect to be treated healthily. It's got to go both ways, Minerva. And so Petunia is not lacking compassion. She's not lacking empathy for what Minerva's going through. She has tremendous amounts, and she loves her very much. Mm-hmm. But she's not willing to allow unhealthiness.
She's in her integrity.
Yes, thank you. And she's not willing to bend her integrity for somebody else's condition. So there's a period of time there where I see like they're not together, and I see Minerva's decline, and I actually only see Petunia come back into Minerva's life right at the very end when she's dying. Like, I don't know if it would be exactly the last day, but you just see her coming in to actually just say goodbye, and that when I try and say to her what Petunia was feeling, Minerva says to me, "It's okay. I'm going to describe to Petunia that I know what she was feeling, that she was sad, that she loved me, that it hurt her to do these things, but that she was staying inside of her own integrity, while at the same time knowing that somebody else was suffering, and that doesn't sit well with her. It just means that that's the complications of being healthy." And I said,
Well, I think some people just paused the podcast there, which is good.
and I think this is really important because Petunia's looking at me and crying and saying to me, "I really needed to hear that because I am not willing to come outside of my integrity no matter how other people feel or what they're going through. They're adults. That's their responsibility. I cannot be over accountable for other." She said that was one of my life lessons that I knew I had to fix from the way I was raised to be over accountable. And then when I came out, I realized I wasn't responsible for other people's beliefs and feelings and the consequences of it. So she said, this was really, really wonderful for me, Karen, to hear that Minerva really understood that I loved her. That was the only thing I had in my mind was, will she know I loved her? Will she know how much it hurt me? But I was not willing to come up to break my integrity for her unhealthiness. That's not the battle that I'm going to lose.
I think that's the question that we get asked most often in sessions. It has to do with, does the dead person now understand the intention of what I was trying to do? And I think that speaks to our desire as humans to be understood.
Very much. Okay, so then Minerva says to Petunia that she ended up reaching out to her daughter to apologize to her daughter. And Petunia says to me, "I know because I reached out to her daughter." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "I reached out to her daughter too." So both women, Petunia and Minerva, both ended up reaching out to the daughter to say that mom was dying. And the daughter, I didn't name her though, Kelly.
The daughter's fine.
I'll just say the daughter. So the daughter ended up speaking to Minerva, and Minerva apologizes and owns her stuff to her daughter, but doesn't do it to Petunia before she passes. So she reaches her daughter. So then Petunia says to me, "Yes, I know. I currently am starting a friendship with her daughter." And she says, "We are talking about her mom. We've actually met at Minerva's house to go through all of the things. And I've been able to be of help to her daughter because I was in the house." And she said, "This is something that her and her daughter and I are grieving over, was that her daughter wasn't in that house for those last few years. I was. And that somehow Minerva had chose me to replace her daughter. And I'm trying to say to her, I'm sorry your mom did this." And then they both find out that they're both gay. Well, they know now. They both know that. And they have these conversations around Minerva and her beliefs and the grooming and trying to understand the grooming behind it. Minerva's last message or so to Petunia was that both of these younger women were striving for integrity. Both of these women wanted to be fully and honestly who they were. And she fought against both women doing that. She was not a healthy woman supporting another woman. And she apologizes to them that she was actually against that and how hurtful it was for both women, for another woman to do that to them. And then Minerva says, yeah, she says, it's totally understandable that they're hurt and angry about it. She says, but I wasn't authentically me anyway. She said, like, I didn't have my own levels of being authentic in life. And right to the end of my own life, I people pleased other people. I manipulated Petunia. She says, I didn't live my own authentic life. So she says, I want to acknowledge that I didn't, and that overall, and that sure, I wanted to be authentic in some things that were safe and easy, but no real deep look at anything, or real deep honesty, for instance, even about my own marriage to my daughter's dad. And she says, I didn't even look at anything like that. And she says, I just really basically just wanted to come out looking like the victim so that people would be okay with me. And she says, I want to apologize.
Okay, let's translate that. To be okay with me means don't hold me accountable. Feel sorry for me, hold me to no standard so I can get away with my bullshit.
Yeah, which is what she wanted her daughter to do, which is what she wanted Petunia to do. Mm-hmm. So she says, I have these two young women in my life that I was fortunate to have because they were showing what integrity meant, mm-hmm. and what, honesty and hard work and really living beautifully means. And I didn't appreciate it at all. And she says, so I really wanted to come through today. She wanted me to be here. And I wanted to acknowledge what I've learned since I've crossed. And she says, and to show up as the best, healthier version that I ever offered in my human life. Mm-hmm. And that I'm sorry that it came to this point to have to do it and that I didn't do it right to the end.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it kind of felt light to hear the connections in the beginning, and it took a hard turn. Mm-hmm. It's neat to see too. I'm not going with in any particular direction with this, but it's neat to see how when someone passes, we can connect and have honest conversations about them. And I'm not talking gossip. I'm talking about like the daughter and the pseudo daughter connecting over things that hurt both of them, where wounds occurred and what they're doing for growth, and how two women can sit there in their pain and build each other up and themselves. And again, the beauty of friendship, right? There's still very remarkable things that come out of this story, and I hope people don't miss them. Thank you for listening to Coffee with the Sarlos. If you enjoyed the show today, please be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform and leave a review. New shows will air every other Saturday.